is approaching 8 o'clock. So Sir Keir Starmer is launching 5 promises today, which he says will make for a better Britain with him in charge.
The Labour leader is pledging a decade of national renewal, but will it be enough to win a general election? So in the next year or so? Well, Keir Starmer joins us now live from Salford. We want to get on to your pledges. Absolutely. Good morning, Ms Starmer. Good to speak to you this morning. But I think we have to reflect our lead story first of all, don't we? The situation in Northern Ireland and the critical condition a police officer been left. I know that you were advisor for Northern Ireland policing for many, many years. You will be horribly aware of the impact on the community, of course, the family, and indeed the police force by this.
Yeah, I'm shocked by this news, and I think everybody watching this will be shocked. And obviously, our first thoughts are with the officer, with his family and his friends in what is a shocking incident. As you rightly say, I worked in Northern Ireland for 5 years with the police service of Northern Ireland, so first-hand with the officers there. And I know what impact this will have on the whole of the police service in Northern Ireland, the impact it will have across communities. Obviously, there's going to have to be an investigation. We need to get to the bottom of this. But there's no hiding from the impact that this will have right across Northern Ireland. It's very sad to hear, shocking to hear, and there needs to be that investigation and the perpetrators need to be brought to justice. But, as I say, my first thoughts are with the officer, his family and his friends.
Investigation hugely important, of course. It won't have escaped your notices that we're approaching the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. That political instability that has come from that agreement, political stability that came about from that agreement, something that lots of our viewers this morning won't even remember. But there is that fear, isn't there, regardless of what the motive behind this attack was, that this could cause an issue as we approach that anniversary.
Well, I think there's always that lurking concern. You're right, White, quite right. It is 25 years, as you rightly say, this year, this April, since the Good Friday Agreement was signed. And I know that there may possibly many people watching who won't remember that, but it was such a historic event after the conflict, after, you know, more than 3,000 murders in Northern Ireland, to finally get an agreement that has allowed so much to change in Northern Ireland over the last 25 years. As I say, I worked there for 5 years, from 2002 onwards, implementing some of the proposals that came out of that agreement, including this change within the police service of Northern Ireland, making sure that the police reflected and were drawn from both communities and had confidence. And in Northern Ireland, we've come a long, long way. And, you know, so much of Northern Ireland is unrecognisable from the situation just 25 years ago. And we need to make sure that we push forward with that. This was an awful incident involving this officer. But we have to look at the wider goal here. There will be lurking concerns. I completely understand that. But so much has changed in Northern Ireland, and we all need to make sure that this shouldn't be party political. I think the role of the UK government in Northern Ireland, you know, whether it was Tony Blair, John Major, they understood this very well. Okay. And an incoming Labour government is the sort of honest broker, holding communities together, making sure that we move forward, because that Good Friday Agreement was a huge, huge moment in the history, not just of Northern Ireland, but of the whole of the United Kingdom.
Well, absolutely, absolutely it was, and good to hear your views on it. So, your 5 promises, your 5 missions. Rishi Sunak laid out 5 pledges only a month ago. He said he will stand by not delivering them. If he can't, that he will make that promise to do it or not, you know, and stand by that he can do it. Why are your 5 promises, 5 missions better? And what means that you think you can deliver it more?
Well, I think my 5 missions are different and more substantial. Let me just explain that. Because they're setting out what we would do in government, the missions, but also how we would do it. What does a mission-driven government look like that has clarity, the 5 things we intend to achieve over a 5-year period of government? And they are born out of all the discussions I've had across the country with members of the public, with communities, with businesses. And there's a real frustration. I'm sure many people watching this will share that frustration that for many years now, we've been sort of engaged in the quick fix, the sticking plaster fix to politics and never really dealing with the fundamentals. I think the NHS is possibly the best example of this. Every year for the last 13 years, we've had a winter crisis. It's just that every year it gets worse. We then have a sticking plaster, a quick fix that just about gets us through to the summer. We have a bit of a breathing space in the summer. Then we go back into the same problem. We don't fix the problem.
Yeah, I agree. And I think everybody would agree that they want it fixed and they don't want a short term. But let's talk about the NHS then. It looks like the RCN are in talks. They've called their 48-hour strike off, that they're now in proper talks about pay. We found, haven't we, though, that we've had months and months and months of discontent with unions. Other unions are not already expressed unhappiness that the RCN might get their deal. Labour is still very much seen as in bed with the unions, reliant on the unions. And what people want is stability. So how can you deliver on that better than the government, who looks like they might be about to do that anyway? Let's talk detail.
Yeah, let me take that in two stages, if I may. Just on the RCN, I think many people watching this morning will be absolutely flabbergasted that it's taken this long for the government to get in the room to talk to the RCN. You will remember that 2 weeks before Christmas, before the very first nurses' strike, the RCN said, if you come in the room and talk to us about pay, we won't even go on strike. That was 10 weeks ago, and over 100,000 people have had their appointments cancelled. So the government yesterday has done what the RCN invited them to do 10 weeks ago. And they're going to have to explain to those 100,000 people or so why they've inflicted that misery on them. The second thing I'd say, and this is really important, is the RCN is only one of the trade unions involved in the NHS. So the RCN on its own, having talked to the RCN on its own, is not going to solve these disputes. The government needs to take the same approach with everyone. But your bigger challenge is a really important one, because the missions I'm setting out today are about not what we're going to do in the short term, which of course has to be done. I completely recognise that. But what are we going to do in the long term? It's saying, look, there are 5 driving missions of an incoming Labour government. We want the highest sustainable growth in the G7 in our economy. That's a huge, ambitious goal. We want to make sure that the NHS is fit for the future, for the next 75 years, not just get through this winter crisis. We want our streets to be safe. We want, you know, the barriers to opportunity for every child everywhere to be removed, and we want to be a clean power superpower across the country. So 5 bold missions, which are about not just what we need to do now to fix the problem. Every government has to do that. But how are you going to fix the fundamentals? And if you like, unlock the pride and purpose in our country. We've got huge ambition across our country, but we're in this sort of cowering position where we don't have the confidence to go forward. I want to unlock that confidence, and this will provide focus in government, what we're going to do, what we're not going to do, and it will allow us to operate in a mission-critical way.
So five missions that everybody would be keen to see you put into plan and practice if you do get into power. One of the other really big issues for voters, of course, is immigration and the huge backlog there is that the government has. They've announced today that they're going to try and fast-track 12,000 asylum seekers who are currently waiting and have been waiting for a number of months to try and come through. Do you agree with the government this is the right way of doing it, to give them a questionnaire to try and alleviate some of the pain of that backlog and those people seeking asylum?
Well, I think it's actually a mission of failure. We've got thousands and thousands of asylum seekers backed up in the system with their processes, their claims not processed. And I was astonished when I heard this, but if you take all the people who arrived by small boats in 2021, all of those people, only 4%, 4 out of every 100, have had their asylum claims processed.
So that is a shockingly broken they're suggesting. Is an amnesty the way of doing it then, Sir Keir? I'm sorry, we're just short for time, as you can appreciate.
Well, I think the government's been... I mean, the government's been driven to this, but it's classic sticking plaster, isn't it? We've got such a problem that we haven't dealt with, the fundamentals, that now we'll have a sticking plaster. Rishi Sunak said he wants to get the numbers down, so let's have a fix to get towards the numbers coming down, a quick fix, a sticking plaster politic. But the longer term, and this is where I want to go back to my missions, if you'll allow me, which is you've got to have an asylum system that works properly and processes claims more quickly. But on top of that... criminal gangs are running some of these asylum routes. Those channel crossings are run by criminal gangs. We have to break those gangs and bring them to justice. And that's why I've said a specialist unit within the National Crime Agency that can operate across borders upstream, intercept those gangs. Now, when I was Director of Public Prosecutions, we did these kind of operations in relation to gun smuggling, drug smuggling. Yeah. We need to do it in relation to the criminal gangs that are driving a lot of people, desperate people, in desperate circumstances. So a longer-term fix would be a proper asylum system that actually works in the first place, and this breaking of the gangs upstream. Because if you don't break the gangs, we'll be going round and round this circle in the same way we go round the circle with the NHS or, you know, for that matter, for energy prices as well.
OK. Sir Keir Starmer, appreciate...
We know that it's your time, not ours.
We were stealing your time.
In case you get in trouble with your advisors, we're going to let you go.
Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks. Good to speak to you this morning.
Thank you very much.